Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
So we had 9 people, but one of them has gone MIA, so now we have 8 people. We are going to start all of this off with Hillary Mason. And thank you, all of you who agreed to do this.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So I'm Hillary. I'm a computer scientist, which is important to understand the context of this talk, which is intelligence, amplification, artificial intelligence, and why we don't have more of these things today. And if you feel like tweeting at me, it's H. Mason. I will apologize in advance because this was totally not prepared. So I basically just pulled some quotes and pictures off the internet, and one of them is a really cute monkey. So this is a mural I grew up loving. This used to be in the exit to the ride called Horizons at Epcot Center at Disney World, and it's called The Prologue and the Promise, and it's by Robert McCall, who is actually an artist who was hired to draw what spacecraft would look like. Oh, I'm actually taller than somebody. That doesn't happen very often. To draw what spacecraft would look like in space, and Disney commissioned him to make this one-of-a-kind mural for this ride to sort of talk about the enhanced promise of humanity. And if you look, it goes, time happens as we go to the right, where you see sort of like our historical great monuments, and then our families of all different racially stereotyped people, and then we see the future where we're all living in space, and yet this hasn't happened. Instead, it is 2014, and if you go on a site like Reddit, you'll find questions like this. This is one of the nicer things you find on Reddit for those of you who haven't been there yourselves. It's a pretty awful place sometimes. Also pretty creative, but somebody asked, if someone from the 1950s appeared today, what would be the most difficult thing to explain to them? And here is the answer, right? I have a device in my pocket that is capable of accessing the entirety of information known to man, and I use it to look at pictures of cats and get in arguments with strangers, right? So congratulations, computer science. This is where we are. But let's go back in time. So if you want to learn nothing else of value from me tonight, I can tell you how to make animated GIFs work in Keynote. So in 1956, this book was published, an Introduction to Cybernetics. This was a tome that was written to help scientists who thought that the new science of cybernetics and computing was too technical for them to use in their practice. So it was really everyone should get behind using computing and science because it's the future. And it was also the first use of the phrase intelligence amplification. So the idea was scientists would have their intelligence amplified through the beautiful mechanism of computing. And in 1962, Doug Engelbart, who wrote some beautiful things and of course is pretty famous in this community, so I don't need to tell you about it, but increasing the capability of man. And in 1969, Fred Brooks, who had been at IBM working on the 360 system, went over to UNC Chapel Hill. It was the second computer science academic department in the country at that time, so they could choose what to focus on, and they chose computer graphics. And he, in fact, said, we have the necessaries to build an intelligence-amplifying system in which the mind and machine will cooperate. And he asked, who deserves to have their intelligence enhanced thusly? And he actually got back a list of people who were so deserving from his provost. And he looked through the list, and from this he came to the conclusion that not only was it important that they enhance people's cognitive capacity, but that they solve problems that affect people's lives. And he chose, based on this, to work on some chemistry problems, which actually have not yet been solved today. So let's go back to 2014 and what our internet looks like, and it's full of monkeys doing monkey things. We're starting to see this actually get applied in science, and it's awesome. This quote is from Communications of the ACM last month. It's from this article, where they're talking about a really cool project where computer scientists work with linguists to help rederive the primitive language from which our current spoken languages have descended by understanding things like mutation rates in language. And it's a great example because it's something that linguists could not do on their own. The cognitive requirements of this problem are outside the scope of the human mind. And yet computer scientists would never have solved it without linguists, because what do we know about language? And so it's beautiful, but it's only one example. So computation should give us superpowers, and I'd like to encourage people to think more about that and to make awesome things on the internet. And thank you very much. Drink more.
That means it's my turn. Hello. This isn't flat, is it? No, but oh, it doesn't matter. It's fine. Just take this off here. Too tall for this. Hello. Yes. What was my topic? Playing improvised music to rednecks, which is a sticky catch-all term for talking about house concerts. In between 1999 and 2006, a lot of my gigs as a solo bass player were to other bass players, because outside of that world, being a solo bass player sounded more like a dare than a job. And so it was kind of like, it was like the forfeit that someone had to pay when they got something wrong. But by 2006, I'd realized that the expectations of other bass players was ruining the way that I played. I didn't want that. I didn't want to sit full of a bunch of people who were listening to me with their eyes. And going, oh, that looks clever. So I ditched most of my audience. A handful of them came with me. By 2007, I'd met my now wife, and we'd started to look at interesting ways of touring, because she's a musician as well, and we'd both just got on Twitter, and I sent out a tweet. Actually, I think it was beginning of 2008 that we did this. I sent out a tweet saying, who wants to book us for a house concert? And 30 people responded, 25 of which turned into gigs. And so we went, this is really easy, this is great. But what was most interesting was that a lot of those people who booked us had never heard us. Very few of them had any idea what they were getting into with the solo bass part of it. And so we ended up touring everywhere from Milwaukee, and then I think it was as far north as we went. Wisner, Nebraska was as far west. Lake Charles, Louisiana was as far south, and somewhere upstate New York, I think, was as far east. So we kind of did a bit of a loop in a rental car. But there were a couple of glorious moments when we realized that the person who booked us was obviously trusted within their community. And so everybody showed up. So we playing to 30 people, most of whom thought that the idea of listening to Coldplay was a bit radical. And so I got up with a bass and a bunch of looping toys and things and played what was sort of cinematic ambient electronica with an electric bass, while they looked like they were witnessing a human sacrifice. And this guy with big hair and painted nails and a fur coat, sort of, we're watching a transvestite play weird shit, what's going on? But the context was kind of what made it work. And I was able to meet them halfway, and I brought them quite a long way on their cultural journey. And I learned a lot about just how wrong my stereotypes were about people in the Midwest. And something magical happened, that the music became, rather than the music being the kind of key to a transaction about my specialness on stage, it became a meeting point. It became a sacrament around which a bunch of people came and met each other. And we did a gig in Dallas on the same tour, where the halftime conversation between the members of the audience was what their favorite gun and knife show they'd ever been to was. And we were going, we're on Mars, what the fuck? This is the maddest people. And yet they were lovely. And so their understanding of what music, live music was about was messed up. My understanding of what Crazy Rednecks were about was nicely messed up. And everybody went home having had a fantastic evening. And we were playing to numbers of people that in any other kind of venue would have been disastrous. But the economics of it worked out as well because of this gratitude thing I was talking about earlier on. We did a gig in Chicago to 6 people and made $350. And normally playing to 6 people would be the point at which you give up and go home. And for us, it was like, brilliant, we did it. Let's play to 6 people tomorrow night as well. And so we discovered an entire new way of taking music without preconception, music that didn't have to fit a box, music didn't have to fit someone else's genre classification as though it was being put in a section in Virgin Megastore, and play it to like-minded lunatics all over the world. Thank you.
Let's see. I might need your help too. Let's see, I might have you do it because I don't know where it is.
All right. Close Hillary.
Okay.
And right. This is yours.
Yes.
Right? Yep.
Uh-huh. Okay.
There you go.
Great.
Okay, so thanks everyone for asking me to make this presentation. First of all, I just want to say that genetically modified foods in China is a category that is newly emerging, but it's existed for quite some time. And I want to give you the take-home message at the very beginning, which is that GM foods, like anything else, is actually part of state-making in 21st century China. This is an image from the Beijing Olympics from 2008. This stunning moment where all 52 ethnic minorities of China were there to carry the PRC flag. Another very huge state project, as you might well know of, is actually the Three Gorges Dam. What I like about this image is precisely you see this mythical Three Gorges, which no longer exists anymore. It's been, a lot of villages have been submerged and people displaced. And then, of course, the Chinese aeronautics space program, which there's an image not only of the first 3 taikonauts, but also the first woman taikonaut. And then we come to rice, which is actually part of the statecraft of ancient China, that all the waterways, all of the crops that were available in agriculture was very much a part of the creation of ancient China. Whole dynasties have completely fallen away by not being able to provide enough rice. So the importance of rice is something quite significant. Back in 2000, as we know, there was the human genome sequence that was, pronounced. It was delivered to then President Clinton. And very shortly after that, in 2002, there was the Rice Genome Project. Initially, it was the international project where there were over 12 nations. But what happened in 2002 was that the Chinese scientists were able to publish in Nature the rice genome. And this was a huge leap, largely because the sequencing that was available at the time, and as we know now, BGI, Beijing Genomics Institute, has largely dropped the price with these huge sequence machines. Now, why rice? What's so significant about rice? The reason is because simply food insecurity rather than food security is a very huge part of social memory. Here's an image of a constant drought that is part of daily life for many rural workers and peasants across China. And this is actually part of a bigger project I've been writing about regarding biotechnology in China. Most people really think about biotech in China as first generation, where it's really about trying to have drought-resistant plants or pest-resistant plants. But very quickly, as we all know, it's gone very quickly now to second-generation biotech, and that's about bioamplification or biofortification. So, for instance, the recent scandal about golden rice, which I won't have time to talk about tonight, but just will gesture to and mention that this is a huge issue. Having said that, however, the notion of GM foods in China as an evil category is simply not something that really exists. Partly because of that, if you remember that earlier slide of food insecurity. Food security is far more important. Being able to have enough food for a population that's projected to grow from 1.4 billion to 1.6 billion by 2020 is something that is still on the minds of everyone. So what we have in China is this growing interest by the elite, not dissimilar to what happens here in this country or elsewhere in the world, Europe especially, where you have the elites that are concerned more and more about organic food. So there's actually there is a green label. This is the organic label in China. But in the meanwhile, even though food security continues to be the gravest concern for not just Chinese officials, but also ordinary people, what is increasingly becoming more and more of a grave concern is the food safety crisis. I'll be talking a little bit more about this with regard to the regulatory mechanisms tomorrow, but I just want to gesture to you that this is an issue that everyone has been deeply concerned about on the everyday. And so I'm just going to end with this image. This is a wonderful image. It's a website that was produced by a Chinese graduate student, and it's it's 支出 Changwen, which means throw out your food out the window. And so it's basically a website documenting from 2004 to 2011 all the different scandals and different examples in which there have been contaminated or tainted foods that have been reported in China. So it's a fascinating website. I highly recommend you look to that to look at the ways in which citizen science is starting to transform the ways in which we think about biotech in China. So by way of ending, I just want to say that genetically modified foods is increasingly becoming more and more of a category, and it's going to resemble perhaps Euro-American discourses precisely because of the food safety crisis. So thanks very much.
Hi. So in 1993, I wrote an article for a new magazine. Why is it not forwarding here? Because I'm in slideshow. There we go. So in 1993, I wrote an article for a brand new magazine called Wired. I actually didn't think that this magazine was going to survive too long. I was thinking of asking my expenses up front, but it was about this group called cypherpunks, and that got me into writing about cryptography. And all during the 1990s, I wrote about the Clipper chip wars and the crypto wars of the 90s, and wound up writing a book about it, which came out in the year 2000. And I dealt with all the issues about it then. But one regret that I had during the course of researching the book was I never got to go inside the NSA, to cross the triple fence that's highly protected, and see what that was like. I actually did talk to someone who was in the NSA, but they made me meet him outside the grounds in the National Cryptologic Museum that was there. So that was back then. And last fall, of course, with all the Snowden leaks and the controversy about what we learned about what the NSA is doing, Wired, where I now work, wanted to follow up on it. And they assigned me to write a story, which is actually appearing just now in the issue coming out. It's already online, about the NSA. And the angle we decided to take, and it's right up our alley, is about the tech companies. What was the effect of all this stuff on them, on their reputation? This is actually an illustration that appears within the article there. So I got all the tech companies to agree with me, Microsoft and Google and Apple and Facebook. But I thought I should also go to the NSA and see what they would do. My expectations were pretty low. And when I first contacted them, that sort of backed up my expectations. They said, well, maybe we could have you submit questions by email, and then we would reply anonymously by email, which is pretty much what I had faced with, the first time around. But then all of a sudden things changed pretty drastically. They said, well, maybe we could get someone to talk to you. And then finally he said, well, maybe you can come to visit, like this week. And I said, wow. And, and I didn't know who I was going to talk to or whether I would get in on the grounds. Then they asked me some questions before to make sure I can get in, like my social security number and whether I was a citizen. And they wanted to know the make, model, and serial number of my tape recorder. This is my tape recorder. I had to open it up to get the serial number. And I gave them that information, and they said, okay, here's the information and how to go. So I went down the Baltimore-Washington Expressway and took the exit. And I went through all these complicated gatehouses and proved who I was, and I had to park in a assigned parking space that they gave me, and then I walked in there. And to my relief, I was in the actual building, the iconic building you see every time you see a Snowden leak. They show a picture of that building. So I got in, and I immediately realized, something that I knew, but it really brought it home to see everyone walking around, and a lot of people were in military uniforms. And the NSA is part of the Department of Defense. And this is sort of a window into their thinking. And because they consider themselves as warriors to protect us, as soldiers. And they're disappointed that people don't thank them for their service like the way we do the rest of the soldiers there, because in their mindset, they are protecting us as much as the soldiers overseas are. And as a matter of fact, they made a point to show me on the wall there the names, or sometimes just the markers, when they can't use the names, of people who had fallen, who had died working for the NSA to protect us there. So they ushered me to this conference room. And to my relief, I was going to talk to these top people. The general counsel, Raj Day, was there, the woman who was in charge of all the partnerships, private partnerships the NSA had, and this fellow named Rick Leggett, who was a very high official who was in charge of something called the Media Leaks Division there, which basically was created for the Snowden damage control. You saw him in 60 Minutes also. And then in walks General Alexander, the director of the NSA. And he kicked off the session. It was like 2.5 hours of me getting to ask NSA anything I wanted. So what did I ask him? So I asked him about PRISM, which I'd still been trying to figure out, because the companies really didn't know everything about it. And it really is the program by which the companies are compelled to provide information. And there were some things that came from the slides that were released, leaked by Snowden and written about in the Washington Post and the Guardian, that just didn't seem to square what the companies were saying. And they said that was because the slides were done for an audience that's already knew all the code words and things like that. So that misunderstanding just arose. As it turns out, the misunderstanding is a big deal for them. They really feel that the reason why they're under such heat is that people don't understand it. In their view, they collect these haystacks. And that's the big information they collect. And we get nervous about that. They say, wow, they get all the metadata about all our phone calls. But to them, those haystacks really don't really exist. They act like they're not there, and they're only a privacy threat until they actually access them. And when they access them, and I believe there's a lot of rules and regulations and minimizations that takes place whenever they see, in the PRISM haystack, evidence that someone's a U.S. citizen or even has a green card, they have to back off and get other permissions and things like that. So in their view, the collection is not a danger to us and a constitutional violation. It's the accessing of it, and there's rules for that. And I said, well, that's fine and good right now because you're wonderful people and the president's a wonderful guy. But what if Nixon was the president? What if a J. Edgar Hoover type was the head of the NSA and they were using it against us? And they said, don't worry about that, because in that case, our people there are very conscious of things, and they would all go into the inspector general's office and they would complain, and the line would be longer than Disneyland to drop a dime on the people who are abusing your rights there. And I actually put in the story, I used that line in the story, and then I said, well, considering what's happened to whistleblowers in the past, they would be in for a ride wilder than anything Anaheim had to offer. So finally I asked them we talked about Snowden there, and they really hate Ed Snowden. And even though they acknowledged there was a value to the debate that we were now having, they just wouldn't give him the credit for doing it there. They just felt that he was a person who betrayed his country, who betrayed them, who put us in danger there. And they really don't like the guy. But I have to say that I owe him something, because Ed Snowden, because the NSA has to respond to the public, got me in there. Thanks, Ed.
All right, so when we pass the keywords around, when we went around for talk slides, I thought of a keyword, and it was just a meta-syntactic variable, but you guys wanted it, so here it is. Minimum viable lifestyle. All right, so one of my favorite quotes from Coco Chanel is, when accessorizing, always take off the last thing you put on. And I think that's very true, because people do too much. They do more than they need to in their life. They think that everything is helping them to accomplish their goals, but that's not true. So the question is, what are the accessories you should take off of your life? So I'm a big believer in the Nietzschean becoming, in the velocity of iteration of self. And I think that this, just like your access to a gym, is proportional to the inverse of the square of the number of features or baggage you carry in your life. So we want to nudge you toward parsimony of features in your life so that you can iterate and become a better person. All right, so I'm just going to offer you 10 tidbits because this is a 5-minute talk. A crowd that wears black. So if you had a crowd that wears all black and standing outside a nightclub, and a crowd of people wearing sort of all colored clothes, I would challenge you that the people who were wearing all black, they're more individualistic, they're more interesting, and actually much more diverse. Oh, well, there you go. Okay, so thanks for recognizing that, Lily. So my concept for you, my teaser is everyone has the same size feature space polygon count in life. And I would say that monochromats like myself have an advantage because we economize over color space. We don't blow all of our features on our wardrobe, okay? So also, if you wear black, nobody is going to notice if you wear it over and over again. That's very helpful in life. Okay, denim. If you have denim, you don't need to be washing it all that much, or if ever at all. APC, a French fashion brand, they're very clever. They have a line of denim called Butler jeans. And so the idea is you can wear something out, raw denim, for 6 months, and then turn it in for a huge discount, and someone else will pay, 4 or 5 figures for your, worn-in denim. And the idea is that they say in the Middle Ages, people used to not wear their own chainmail. They used to get butlers for them, to wear in their clothes for them. And it's really nice because once you realize you don't actually need to be washing your denim all that much, you don't need to be owning all that much denim. And in fact, I don't. Okay, so I travel a lot. I like to travel to Southeast Asia for 2 weeks at a time on a very, very small 10-liter backpack. And people are like, well, is that sanitary? Can you get away with it? And you have to realize that packing intelligently is very important. And underwear and undershirts are the limiting reagent of your travel. You don't have to pack multiple pairs of pants, multiple shoes. Your toiletries bag can be very small, but you need a lot of underwear. So I'm not asking you to economize on underwear. Just remember that. The shampoo and conditioner industrial complex. I was not drinking when I wrote this slide. So the story is I used to use shampoo, and I no longer, for over a year, I haven't used shampoo. And think about it. You wash your hair gets dry and brittle, then you use conditioner because your hair is dry and brittle, and your hair gets nice and moisturized for 5 seconds. But then over time, your hair gets oilier, you wash your hair more, you rinse, repeat, because you need it. And so they've created this fictive product, inserted this need in your life that didn't need to exist at all. Because most people say, oh, when I stop shampooing, my hair gets really oily. But that's just a recoil effect. So just get over it, go for, especially if you're a guy, go for it for a few weeks, and you'll see that you don't need shampoo and conditioner. You just need some hot water to remove some of the excess oil. And there's a lot of reasons to avoid shampoo, sodium lauryl sulfate being one of them. It's a surfactant. It's very bad for you. If there's sodium lauryl sulfate in your toothpaste also, it will give you canker sores. Stop using it. Sports, you don't need to watch it because I used to watch sports, and after I stopped, I got 20% more time back. Okay. All right, so the hegemony of recipes. Recipes are really, really complicated, and not for, I think, for pretty arbitrary reasons. I have a lot of chef friends, and they confess to me that they have written recipe books, and they have recipes that they've never cooked. All right, so why are you following that? So I think the way to do it is to cook for yourself. It's much more delicious. Cook single vegetables. Take some celery, try to steam it, saute it, braise it, do whatever you want. Understand the vegetables. Build a personal relationship with vegetables like you do with Jesus. All right, prophylactic panaceas. I was on an alliteration kick. So I'm a big believer in panaceas because they are very economical. One of my favorites is saline. So if you feel like you're getting sick, you can irrigate your sinuses, your ear canals, your throat with it. I also use saline to style my hair because, as you know, the Aussies figured out that they call it surf spray, that surfers have really nice hair. Well, saline is a great texturizer. Take a really good multivitamin. One way to tell how good your multivitamin is, beyond all the BS, the marketing BS, is look at what the source of vitamin E is. There's actually 8 or 9 forms of vitamin E, and the cheapest one is alpha tocopherol. That is synthetic. It's from petrochemicals, and you don't want that one. So you want the one that has, the best distribution of vitamin E's. There's a lot of other panaceas like adaptogens, ginger, turmeric, holy basil. Talk to me about it. Weak ties. There is a really insidious paper in the Journal of Sociology by Mark Granovetter in 1973 that everyone cites that's the strength of weak ties, okay? So I think people got the misimpression that they should be networking. I personally hate networking, and I think that it's much better just to make real friends, like friends that you really want to hang out with, and just stop networking, because the few strong ties you have, if you weight all of your connections by the strength of your ties, strong ties will get you a lot further, aka friends. The metaphysics of presence. So something that my good friend Linda Stone cued me into was our common therapist, who is an existential investigator. And she helped to cue me into something that also I read from a book called The Zen of Motorcycle, The Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, which is this idea, this quality of being present. Not in the millisecond before and not in the millisecond after, but being present, because that is like a news feed, a better Facebook feed than Facebook. You should be in on this. And this is really, really good stuff to read. Campari. So I used to, I feel like, be a functional alcoholic. And then I discovered that white wine masks kind of alcoholism pretty well. But I found that another drink was more economical than white wine even, which is Campari. So you start with a Negroni, which is Campari, gin, and vermouth. You can move to you can step down later in the night to an Americano. Then you can step down to a Campari soda. Something lighter would be an Aperol soda, but all very much like Campari. You can. I like these I like these alcohols that you can build like a whole spectrum of drinks out of. Anyways, that's an arbitrary deck for you.
Thank you. That's how that works? Okay. That's good. All right, you guys. So for the next few minutes, I'm going to talk about rumor transmission and how you can get these kind of runaway communicative processes that lead to rumor panics. Apparently, if you say the word satanic panic, everyone says, ooh, I want to hear about that. So just a little background. My research recently has focused on informal communication dynamics during disasters and crisis events using online data. And rumors are particularly interesting, I think, in this case because they have real effects on public safety. Not only that, but during this context, you have situations where information could be life-saving, so individuals are less likely to filter it because of the high cost of not passing it on. So I promised I would talk about satanic panic, and what I'm going to do is just present a quick case study. This is a case that was studied by Jeffrey Victor back in the 1980s. It's a famous one of a rural town in New York, so appropriate to our current setting, that became totally convinced that a satanic cult was out to kidnap their children and sacrifice their virgins. So this is a particularly interesting case to study as a sociologist, but because what seems like, from the outside, illogical group behavior turned out to be fairly logical given the context and the social processes that were happening at the time. So let me introduce the case study just a little bit. So the story takes place, as I mentioned, in rural New York in the late 1980s. And in this particular town, Jamestown, New York, as well as the whole surrounding area, this whole group of people were passing along these rumors that this dangerous satanic cult was going to infiltrate their town. So people are hearing these stories about secret meetings going on in the woods. People are reporting instances of animal sacrifice and kidnappings of children and suicides, and everything is going on. In particular, the culminating event here was that everybody was convinced that the cult was going to kidnap a blonde, blue-eyed virgin and sacrifice her on Friday the 13th. So this is what's going on. All the people in the town are reporting these very strange events, and the police have to start investigating because everyone's very scared. So the police are investigating. They're not really sure what's going on. They discover zero evidence that this cult is practicing or doing whatever they will be in this town. But despite this fact that there's no evidence, the rumors had a really big impact on the town. So people are keeping their children home from school. Absence rates are up by like 4 times their normal instance. And young girls are afraid to walk around in the town. They're staying at home because they don't want to be that blonde girl that gets sacrificed. And everybody's freaking out. So on the surface here, this is a very extreme reaction. But if you think about some of the social processes that are occurring, and this is exactly what Victor did in his study, then some of these things tend to make a little bit of sense. So one thing that was going on that I thought is particularly interesting is the effect of shared emotions. So in this case, people are actually on edge about entirely different things. So they were very concerned with their declining economic status. Things were going on to just make them anxious. And so what turned out is that the context and the cultural effects of their shared prior beliefs in what was a credible threat made them more receptive to this information. So this key reason why the bizarre rumors are taken seriously by many people is that they felt it would be sort of unwise to disregard them in case they were true. In addition to that, as someone who studies social networks, this is a really fun case because what Victor actually discovered was going on is that the underlying social structure here was affecting the communication process. So people were hearing these reports from their children about weird things that were happening at school. Then parents were talking to each other. And in this very small town, the underlying social network had this cyclic process going on. So if I told somebody information, they passed it on, and all of a sudden I hear that information from a seeming third party. And it reinforces my own belief that that's credible information. So you have this very weird sort of cyclic process going on, and everybody's getting their information confirmed by third parties, and they're pushing our beliefs to become more and more extreme because of this process. Now, another thing that I thought was really cool is the role of institutions in this case. So just the fact that the police were investigating, everybody saw that as a sign that there was credible threat in these rumors. Didn't matter that there was no evidence, but the attention that the police were paying, because they were an authoritative source, everybody bought into that information. So these are just sort of a few of the social forces that come into play in this case, and it's a combination of these things that can lead to very rational behavior, which to us seems very irrational. And what happened in this case, everybody, it comes to be Friday the 13th, the town is super on edge, everybody's panicking, nothing happens, and everything kind of just dies away. So that's the end of the story, but I think it's a really interesting, complex situation here because of the interaction with the communication process and the underlying social structure, and then there are many open questions to explore with this kind of a case. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
All right. So I kind of promised you that I was going to make you fall asleep. I don't know if I will accomplish that, but we'll see. So my name is Andres, and I'm really interested in weird stuff on the internet. And this is one of those things. So a while ago, I was looking for, I think it was a laptop or something. So whenever I want to buy something, I go on YouTube and look at unboxing videos. I don't know if you're familiar with this. Whenever you look for a product, just go on YouTube and see how people experience unboxing this product. And it's a really good experience to learn how the product works and how people perceive it. So I was looking at an unboxing video like this one, and what was interesting is that when I looked at the comments, people were obsessed with the voice of the person talking about it. And they were like, oh my God, I can't believe you're using like the rapping thing, and that makes me trigger. And they started talking about this thing called ASMR, and I was like, what the hell is this? So then I looked at all the videos around that, the suggested videos, and there were all these kind of, mostly women, talking in very soft voices, whispering about all sorts of things. So it turns out that this video was not really about unboxing this iPhone. It was really about like listening to this lady you do something really in a soft voice. So then I started becoming really interested in this, and found this video in particular. Let me see if I can play it.
Hi, I heard that you wanted your face painted. We're doing them for free today, so you can choose anything you like. You can choose from superheroes or animals, or maybe just a few stars sparkled on your cheek.
So she's kind of pretending that she's painting your face.
Tiger.
And the video goes for 13 minutes, just her like saying, I'm going to paint this and that. She uses like different instruments to paint your face, overs your forehead with something. And she's one of the most prolific ASMR artists. They call them ASMR artists. And as you can see, this video has like more than 500,000 views. There's tons of them. There is a whole community of people. And so I became really interested in how these emerged. And you can watch this video at home if you want to fall asleep.
Just use this pad to put.
So then I started to become really interested in how it came to be that these people found each other, both the people who whisper, who may or may not be experiencing the ASMR experience, and the people who want these videos. So I found this is the earliest post on this health forum on Yahoo groups of this person who was like, have you ever listened to people with whispering or people with soft voices and experienced this amazing thing? They call it like brain orgasm, or they have all this terminology to use it. And they said, I Googled like weird thing when listening to something, and I found this discussion forum. And so people were like, oh my God, I can't believe it. You also experienced that. So then even this meme was spread in the community where people were like, I can't believe it has a name. And actually the name was invented by one of the members of the community who wanted to give more of a scientific sounding name rather than brain orgasm. And this was very debated in Wikipedia whether this could be an article on this ASMR thing. It was removed several times. Now it's back on because it has gotten so much attention. But it's not a scientific term. So then I looked at the earliest post and see what people were talking about. And this is what triggers people experience this brain orgasm. So you can see it's watching people draw, concentrate, use something, fix something, or watching a video on YouTube of people doing that. So that's kind of what people start describing their triggers as the kinds of things. And actually the classic example for people to describe these videos is Bob Ross, the painter, who speaks really quietly. And so people were also interested in sharing their first ASMR experience. So it was like, when I heard the voice of a teacher, of a guy or a girl, or even a broadcaster, apparently NPR broadcasters are the best triggers for this. Then people describe where they feel this. It's your neck, your head, your scalp, the arms, the back, etc. So it's different areas of the head area. Then obviously anything weird on the internet has to have a subreddit. So this is the subreddit for ASMR. These are the top comments on the subreddit. One of them is the video that I showed you, that one, the lady. There is also like deadmau5, the DJ. This one was kind of controversial. This woman who said that ASMR makes her vaginal cavities swell or something. So actually one of the biggest tensions in the community right now is that some people have this kind of more sexual attraction to ASMR, and other people just see it as like, you know, a thing that makes you feel good and sleepy. And within the community, there is always this tension whether, you know, it should be considered something sexual or not. And most people will disagree. The reason why that, you know, vaginal comment became really popular is because people were really upset that that was something that will come up to bubble up as a representation of the community, because they're trying to present this not as a weird fetish, but more of a kind of a good experience that everybody should share. And I'm just gonna show you the final. This is, you know, the classic meme that you've probably seen applied to ASMR. And again, you know, what my friends think I do. Most of the ASMR artists are women, so most people, when they hear about the ASMR, they think, oh, you just want to look at, you know, pretty girls talking softly to you. But then this is what my parents think I do, that I'm doing drugs. Like, there is this digital drugs meme that was going around the news about people listening to specific sounds. What society thinks I do, that is a fetish. What the internet thinks I do, what I think I do, which is more like a scientific approach to it. And what I really do, I just fall asleep listening to these videos. Thank you.
I'm David. I'm gonna go through this really quickly. Can I just take it off? 2 really quick notes about Corona. I would never ever drink Corona in Mexico, and if I did, it would be ironic in the way that people drink Pabst, ironically, I think. And the other thing is that Cinco de Mayo sort of exists in Mexico, but not really. Like, it is an actual holiday, but most Mexicans, I don't think, really know why it's a holiday. And it was basically an invention of Corona to sell a lot of beer in the United States, which they've done very well. So this was supposed to be the 10 funniest memes that I was going to tell, and then I realized that I would be up here laughing, and you would not be laughing because I would need to explain why they're funny, and nothing's funny after you explain why. So instead, it's going to be a cultural introduction to Mexico, seen through the perspective of 10 different memes, the first one of which is Edgar. This is called Edgar Falls. And something to know in Mexico is that to call someone gordo or gordito or fatty is kind of an affectionate term. Like, lots of people would call their husbands, hey gordo, like, hi sweetie, hi fatty, it's a nice thing. This is... Oh, the audio stopped working, which is a shame because the audio is the funny part. It's basically a video of a sort of chubby kid who's like whining a lot because his friend's messing with him. And it was the first viral video in Mexico. Everybody saw it. The kid ended up being famous for like a year, and then I don't know what happened to him, but he was on commercials and stuff. And there's a really strong relationship between internet memes and PR in Mexico. Still, if you drive around Mexico City, I would say 20% of the billboards are related to memes in some sort of way from social media. Another one, there's a culture in Mexico that you should be afraid of cops, that cops are not trustworthy in the same way that they are in the United States. And so this guy, I don't know what he did. See, it's really funny for me. So there's a camera there, and he wants everybody to know that he's scared. He's, I'm scared. I'm really fearful right now. There are cops here. I'm really scared. So there are a lot of tweets. Tengo miedo. I'm scared. I'm afraid is just a standard thing that people say right now. Like, my mom's about to turn on the radio. Tengo miedo. It's a tweet. It's a hashtag that's constantly used. Cops are in a lot of these types of videos.
Asalariado de mierda, ojete y enseña tu carita, grábalo.
So these women ended up, they were called the Ladies de Polanco, which Polanco is a neighborhood, an upscale neighborhood in Mexico City. And ladies and gentlemen is not, they're used to describe people who are kind of like wealthy and total assholes. And so this cop was trying, it's a breathalyzer stop, to check for alcohol. They had been drinking, obviously, somewhere. And so he says, okay, now you need to, we're checking to see if you've been drinking or not. And they just start screaming at him like crazy and hitting him. And they say, pinche puto de mierda, chinga tu madre. That's like the worst thing you can say in Mexico. It's fuck your mom. And then this is amazing. They say, pinche asalariado, fucking person with a salary, which is like the weirdest insult in the world. But someone who has to work for a living, how dare you? Okay. The former mayor of Mexico City is Marcelo Ebrard, who is probably, I would say, the best Twitter-using politician ever. He's amazing. And he has a lot of really famous tweets, but he was really well known for, Mexico City it's a volcanic area. There are a lot of earthquakes constantly. And while he was mayor, every time there was an earthquake, he would kind of let people know that there was an earthquake, which is silly, but when there is an earthquake, you do check Twitter to see like, oh, what are my friends saying about the earthquake right now? Or the other thing is that because the kind of rock bed of Mexico City is so soft, every time a truck passes, your entire building starts to shake. So you don't really know if it's an earthquake or if a truck is going by. And then the mayor tells you, no, we have an earthquake. And he didn't put a space between we have and an earthquake, so you kind of have this picture of him like, we have an earthquake, kind of falling over. He's also really funny responding to people. He's still really funny responding to people, even though he's not the mayor. So here, a Twitter user says, Dear Marcelo Ebrard, Mr. Mayor, fuck your mom for having so many public works around our city. Thanks for your attention. And then he responds to him, my mother already died, and if we didn't do so many public works, then your life would be much worse. The intersection between class and ethnicity is really interesting in Mexico. So this is the Gentleman de las Lomas, another really upscale area in Mexico City. He's asking a valet parker to help him with his car. I think it broke down or something. And the guy's like, sorry, buddy, I can't leave my desk. I'm not allowed to. It's also not my job to fix your car. And this guy's like, do you know who I am? And there are so many of these videos of like wealthy, important people who are like, do you know who I am? There's a senator also who does the same thing. She goes postal on some people at an airport. But what's really sad is that one of the things that he says there is pinche indio, which is like, you fucking Indian, which is still an insult today in Mexico, even though every time you hear it, I think people kind of cringe, but you still hear it, which is really sad. Recently, I think this was like last month, they raised the fee of the metro. It's one of the largest metros in the entire world in Mexico City. It's really clean, it's beautiful, I take it everywhere. It used to cost 25 cents to go from stop A to wherever you wanted to go in the city, and they decided to raise the fare from 25 cents to around 45 cents, and people just went nuts. To us, it sounds really crazy, like, so it's 45 cents, that's nothing compared to what we pay here. On the other hand, they're starting to invest, they use too much money to invest in cars and not enough in public transportation. So students protested saying, pos is a way to say pues, which is like, well, I'll just jump. And so I won't pay for it, I'll just jump the turnstiles. And it became a big campaign. All of these students started jumping the turnstiles instead of paying for it, and they used the hashtag PosMeSalto, which became very viral, and it's still kind of a protest. But there were also some epic fail videos of PosMeSalto. Oh. There are lots of those. And then, like the week afterwards, there's a big energy reform, and because of the history of Mexico and the revolution, having the state ownership of oil is very important, especially for the leftist PRD party in Mexico. And so this is a deputy from the lower house of the Congress, and he got naked to protest the energy reform that was passed by the three parties. And so immediately the hashtag became Post Me Encuero, and all of these people started getting naked on Twitter, which is always fun in protest of the reform. A great one that some of you might have seen. I'll turn the sound off on this one, though. During the campaign, the candidate who was favored to win and who is now president, Peña Nieto, was at the biggest book fair in the country in Guadalajara, and someone asked him, what are 3 books that have influenced your life? And he said, the Bible, and then like long pause, really long pause. It's like, and then that other book by somebody else, and then so he really couldn't name 3 books, which was really sad. Gandhi is sort of the Barnes & Noble of Mexico. It's a big bookseller, and they have really funny advertising. And so people sort of used the Gandhi style of advertising to make fun of the president, which was funny. I don't know if I have, oh yeah. And so then his daughter retweeted a tweet. I had talked about class a little bit, saying, greetings to the big, to all of you idiots who are part of the proletariat. Like, who says that? And you just criticize because you're envious. So that became, so prole, kind of the proletariat, or I'm proletarian, became a really big thing, saying, yo soy prole, I'm proletarian, and which also became prole, which is I'm in favor of reading. So like, no, I'm not rich, but I know I can name 3 books. The last one, there's a theme in many of these, which is that there is kind of this entrenched, powerful class in Mexico City, and then there is this sort of new middle class that is rising up, that is taking to social media to criticize the old base of power. Lady Profeco is, so lady is used for all of these people who are kind of from that older class. Lady Profeco is the daughter of the person who's from the Consumer Rights Agency in Mexico. Is there a U.S. equivalent? So they're in charge of consumer rights for people, and it's a government agency. Very ironic that this is the daughter of the person who's in charge of the entire agency. She goes to a very hip restaurant in the neighborhood where I live and says, you know, I'm important, give me that table. And the woman who owns the restaurant says, no, you need to wait, just like all of these other people are waiting for your table. And then she goes back to Profeco and she talks to all of her dad's buddies who work there and says, close that restaurant because they didn't give me the table. They did close the restaurant, and an order from the consumer rights body, and a lot of people had tweeted and taken pictures of what had happened. So as soon as they ended up closing the place, there was this huge Twitter protest, and Lady Profeco was the hashtag. I don't remember what happened to her, if anything, but all of the people who work within Profeco who were part of this were fired. And I think her dad is still running it, if I remember. Typical. But, you know, so what this is generating is a debate. This is from the website Animal Politico, which is a really good digital news site. And it's asking, could social networks put limits and influence on the power of the juniors? And junior is kind of like a rich, annoying kid who thinks that he can do anything because he's a rich, annoying kid. And there's from Fusion.net, from the Univision, the new channel, they interviewed Alfonso Tamés asking about all of this. And he says, what you have here is a clash between 2 worlds. It's a Mexico that values improving your lot in life through hard work against the Mexico of privilege and arrogance, where family connections get you what you want. A lot of Mexican memes are just really funny. If you understand the context, they wouldn't have been funny if I said it here in front of all of you. But then there's also this really interesting social layer behind it, where you have these 2 different senses of power that are clashing online right now. Thank you.
So I'm going to whisper my talk. And then if you feel a singing experience in your head, you can tell me a kind of a tingling feeling in your neck. And it's working. Excellent. Hi there. So, final talk, playing with embarrassment. So I'm really interested in how to encourage playfulness, playful exploration, playful learning, and the use of play to motivate engagement in all kinds of weird non-play contexts, like art museums, or civic engagement in the street, or civic disobedience in the street, or learning, all these kinds of things. And the thing I ran in during my research was that one big thing that keeps people from doing this is embarrassment. Just to give you a practical example, this is a project by Floyd Miller and Chad Toprak at RMIT Melbourne, who thought, hey, let's encourage people to exercise with this cute exergame, which works like the following. You have a projector. The projector projects this float on a water down there. As long as there's a float projected, you're allowed to stand. The moment there is not a float projected, you have to pull yourself up as long as there is no float, and then you let yourself down. Right? Playful way of getting people to exercise. And for some weird reason, Chad came up with the idea and said, this would work perfectly in a public tram. And apart from the security issues, right, the tram just taking a course while you're pulling yourself up there, they noticed people would not do this. And when they interviewed people, why would you not do this? People said, well, because it's embarrassing if I pull myself up there in the street. So that's, for me, an actual, interesting, very important issue if we're interested in playful exploration in other contexts. So the obvious question for me is, well, how does this work? What is embarrassment, and how can we as designers mitigate that? And as an answer for that, I'd like to turn to some dead white male sociologists. The first dead white male sociologist is W.I. Thomas. You might know him from the Thomas theorem, who noted that basically our social world, the world as we experience it within a culture, is made up of types of situations, like a presentation or dinner together with a family. And socialization means that we learn the proper rules of behavior for each situation from our parents and peers. In a word, we learn to behave ourselves, right? In church, I don't want to sit here in silence, but I learned this is how I should do it. Now, how does this proper rules of situation relate to embarrassment? Cue in the second dead white male sociologist, Charles Horton Cooley, who wrote in the 1920s that how we come to have a self, an identity, a notion of who we are, is not that we look at ourselves in the mirror, but that we think about how other people might see and perceive us. And feelings like shame or embarrassment or pride are basically thinking about whether other people might value or devalue what we're doing in a situation. And the realization that they may devalue us and therefore might, disconnect from us, the fear of that disconnection, that's shame or embarrassment, basically, right? Fearing that your peers or your parents might think poorly of you and therefore might not support you as much, you're losing social connection with them. That's embarrassment. Just to give you a practical example, right, as children up to a certain age, we have no problem doing all kinds of crazy, weird, wacky, playful shit. But at a certain point in time, at a certain point in our age, we start thinking about, how do other people perceive what I'm doing? How do they think or feel about that? That's the moment when we get socialized into culture. That's the moment when we start getting embarrassed and therefore stop playing things that we drawing things that we otherwise would not proudly present, even though they're looking crappy, because we don't care about other people's opinion before that. So to summarize, that's the definition of embarrassment. Doing something situationally inappropriate, thinking about how other people seeing you will think about you, devaluing you as a course, and that creates fear of losing social connection. And that's, with chat and with the exergame, right? That's what keeps people from engaging from play in non-play context, because they're afraid of being embarrassed. But here's the weird thing. Weirdly enough, sometimes that actually does work. Like, for instance, here in the Global No Pants Day, which just was at January 12, 2014, where people wear no pants in a subway, in a tram, which was started 2002 by Improv Everywhere here in New York. And nowadays, globally, millions of people walk into a tram dressed without pants, without being embarrassed. Or with this thing, which also works, which are festivals like IGFest or Play Public, where game designers come together and play weird games in the middle of the street without embarrassment keeping them from doing so. So how does this work? Why does this work? That's the question I'm currently grappling with. Throw more ideas at me. Here's just 3-4 little things that I have observed that explain these kind of things. First explanation is, well, this is a festival situation, right? The No Pants Day is a specified festival. The IGFest, Play Public, there's a specified festivals. And festivals are types of situations where we have learned in a culture, that's where it's okay, that's where it's expected to be transgressive, right? Go to a German carnival in a carnival city and be the spoil sport who is not silly drunk and does weird thing. And you will feel the full pressure of social expectation on your shoulder, right? So festival, there it's okay because that's expected in this situation. Second reason is these situations typically offer you a shield from disapproving eyes. It's typically not the way that everybody looks on you that might think badly of you for doing this. One of the players I interviewed said, I like to play in a train, but I get very emotionally worked up about playing in a train. So what I do is I try to find the one single solitary cabin where nobody else is, and I sit in the farthest corner behind, have all these other chairs in front of me so nobody sees me, and there I can play without feeling embarrassed because nobody else can see me. So physical shields from disapproving eyes. Third reason, there's normalcy in numbers. Right? On these play festivals, there's a play community of others who, by playing, signal to each other that what they're doing there in a situation is perfectly normal and acceptable. That's what we do together as an in-group in this situation, right? And people typically have different embarrassment threshold, which leads to these interesting embarrassment cascades, right? I'm sure many of you know this internet video. So basically, right, if you're in a party and there's good music playing, and you would like to dance, but then you think, well, if I would now start dancing, I'd be the only one on the dance floor, and everybody would be looking at me, and ooh. So you need one weird person who's completely okay with that, stepping in the middle, embarrassing themselves, and then another person whose embarrassment threshold is a little lower says, oh, if that guy is doing that, I'm not the only one. That's kind of a bit more normal. I'm okay with that. And then suddenly you have these cascade of more and more and more people saying, yeah, that looks fun. And if there are so many people, not everybody's eyes is just on me, and then I can also join. So you have these interesting cascade. And the thing is, this works right as community of people doing this together, but it also works as material traces of others. This is a wonderful example by Nina Simon, director of the Santa Cruz Museum of Arts and History, done a beautiful participatory exhibition, All You Need Is Love, written a wonderful book, Participatory Museum. Every designer should read that book. And what they did is to encourage participation, they have these big walls posting questions like, what's the craziest thing you've done for love, right? Imagine being the only person in the museum standing there with a pen, everybody else of the visitors looking at you while you write your answer, right? Ooh. Now, imagine you walk in and they already pre-fill it with some answers and you see a lot of other people having answered it, right? Suddenly this becomes normal, this becomes okay, this becomes appropriate. And this, I would argue, also works with mediated imagined others, right? Like the internet allows furries to think about, oh, I'm not the only one doing this. This is sort of normal. But still, what it needs is that first person, that weird first person who is willing to make him or herself vulnerable by stepping into the dancing floor and saying, I am willing to expose myself to ridicule and embarrassment by the others, but by doing so, by stepping in the middle, I allow the others to do the same, because I'm signaling I have benign intent. This is a situation which is safe for you. And I think this is one of the reasons why in play we actually enjoy being jointly embarrassed, as for instance in karaoke, right? Because think about it, why would people do karaoke? Why would you get silly drunk and then stand yourself up in a crowd and present to the whole crowd that you're a crappy singer, right? And I think the reason for, I think there are two reasons for this, why this interesting mechanic work. The first thing is this play community that mutually signals to each other, this is okay, you can sing crappy. First, it allows us to shamelessly indulge in the kind of things we would like to do, but in everyday life are not allowed to do. But here together in this, right, this is perfectly fine, right? You can sniff at my bottom because we're playing Twister and it's Twister. But the deeper reason is I think that this shared joint situation of embarrassment creates a deep sense of social connectedness and of relatedness. Singing terribly in front of others who cheer us works very much like the same way in which young dogs play with each other, right? On the one hand, you have the dog lying down. That's the person singing crappy. And that dog lying down, that person singing crappy, basically signals to the others, I trust you not to hurt me. I make myself vulnerable here, but I trust you to respect my boundaries and not take advantage of the situation that you can embarrass me and deride me. And vice versa. The other people looking there, cheering instead of deriding the other person, signal their trustworthiness. They signal, yes, I see that you have exposed yourself to me, but I am not taking advantage of that. I'm actually congratulating you for opening yourself up to me as well. Thank you.
Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.